Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Talking Point. Telecom has taken a bit of a backseat or a sidestep in the last few days, if you look at Bharti Airtel in particular, as the markets have rallied on the back of the rebound stocks. Frankly, financials have been at the forefront, isn't it? However, the question remains that from a really long-term perspective, can the next decade be the decade of growth for telecom? Unlike the past one, but in the industry saw largely consolidation. And even from a market's perspective, the stock prices didn't really give breakneck returns. I mean, just look at this. Bharti Airtel in June 2010 was at about 245. Currently, it's about 560 odd. That's just about doubling or slightly more than doubling over a period of 10 years. That isn't exactly growth. But the questions that I think that need to get answered to get a sense of what the time ahead can be. One, why would, say, for example, a Facebook or a lot of other private equity investors make a beeline to invest in geo platforms at about 22 times FY20 EV EBITDA, when comparable EM peers are probably available for less? Can it be safely assumed? That's the other question. Can it be safely assumed that capital risks and regulatory risks at large are diminishing? Not to forget, of course, competition risk because of the pricing issues that were there in the sector in the past. I think someone who's a veteran of this industry joins us right now to tell us of all of these possibilities and whether some of these possibilities can be reimagined in telecom 2.0, 3.0, or 4.0, whichever we want to call it. Sanjay Kapoor needs no introduction, joins us right now on the show. Sanjay, so good having you. Thanks much for taking the time out. What's your sense, Sanjay, about the frenzy of uh, at least investing rumors and actual investors that we're seeing in one company as of now? What do you make? What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, good morning, first of all. And I think these are the right points to ponder about and find answers to. COVID has obviously realigned a lot of things, and most of the sectors in the market have really seen a downturn and unimaginable zero revenue stage for many industries. And I think coming out from there, definitely telecommunications and the adjacencies around telecommunications have demonstrated a sort of a resistance to COVID. And in the midst of COVID, I think I feel very proud I'm associated with the industry because this industry kept the working environment alive. It kept the entertainment world alive. The families could teach the younger ones in schools and colleges. And above all, I think there was a hope and information around COVID, which allowed sanity to be maintained in the society because it's a societal crisis as much. And therefore, in the midst of this, the demand for telecom went up, and nobody has a debate that all digital companies, whether they are the ones like Zoom and Hangout and others, or the party type of interventions, or whether it's the entertainment companies like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hotstar, all of them have seen their peaks and highs during this period. And therefore, telecom was not an exception. And what has happened to telecom is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, Geo getting attraction from Facebook, P investors, Bharti seeing its peak and surging ahead of the markets is all good news. So I think post-COVID world, if you were to go by the predictions being made on the consumer behavior and trends, tells you that if there is one sector, one industry which is going to hold good post-COVID scenario, and the playbooks for everybody is going to include these industries and the services of these industries, it's telecom. So I'm not surprised that that positivity is going to be sustained over time.
Hmm. Okay, the most commonly used metric across reports, Sanjay, that I read came to be one of this, right? The global telecom spends as a percentage of GDP. Today, there is a Jeffries note which speaks about Bharti Airtel, but in effect brings in that, the ARPU per GDP argument, etc., etc. Now, what's your sense? I mean, when you look at the businesses across and what's happening in India, do you reckon that there is, because of the very nature of the industry, that these telecom spends as a percentage of GDP could rise disproportionately in India?
Yes, I think your inhibition here is absolutely right. when you compare India with China and some other parts of the world, the experience that we have been able to create on our networks is not comparable. 4G is a video world. If you cannot
Mm.
deliver great quality of video to your customers and a great experience to your customers, then your network is not really fully functional. And when you look at China, for example, there are 2 million 4G sites. When you look at India, there are 200,000. A lot of people will come back and say, oh, the customers pay higher over there, or they'll come back and say China, the much larger geography.
Yeah.
I agree to all of that. So I might say that, okay, you cannot just pick up 2 million from China and plug them in India. But if that's not right, even 200,000 is not right. I think the golden mean is somewhere in between, and we are underinvested. And this clearly projected during COVID as well. When we were trying to work from home, we realized that capacities were a problem. We realized that the quality was a problem because the networks have been oriented to serving the commercial districts, the commercial parts, but not work from home or work from anywhere, for example, in India. And also, we know that we all struggle to even get a simple call through very many times indoors. The world has changed. 80% of voice was consumed outdoors, but 80% of data is consumed indoors. And to provide coverage indoors, you require a very different type of investment to be made. And I have no doubts in my mind that India can do with a lot better investment, lot higher investment to improve the customer experience and be globally competitive, which we are not right now.
Yeah, we aren't. So, okay. So you reckon that subject to some of these moves happening by the telcos as well in terms of investment to improve infrastructure and quality, spends could increase as well because there's a lot of skepticism about what could happen to ARPUs. I'll get to that in a bit. My question is this short-term catalyst, Sanjay, that everybody talks about, which is steep yet a segmented price hike or settlement of regulatory issues like the AGR matter or capex moderation. Could all of these happen? Because, like I said, there are doubts about whether telcos can indeed have a 30% price hike after the hikes that have already happened in the last 6 months.
Yes, I think, Neeraj, we really need to look at the full equation. The
Okay.
equation is half on the side of the operators and a lot on the side of the government and regulator as well.
Hmm.
Ultimately, every market needs to realize a price from the consumers, which finally impacts their ARPUs, and that allows them to make adequate money to invest in future technologies and to invest in customer experience. When you look at India, the prices that prevail in our markets are not adequate. These 30% hikes and 40% hikes are not going to lead you anywhere. I sit on the board of a very large company outside India, a telco,
Mhm.
and they do more like 29-30 dollar ARPUs. And even with those ARPUs, there's always a question mark around how much to invest, how much to plow back. And can you imagine a market which has got $2 ARPU or less? How much of a struggle will it create? I have said this earlier that India, to balance this equation, will have to actually go beyond 5, 6, 7 dollars, around that range, if we really want to make it sustainable. So that's on the operator's side. They really need to move towards that, and consumer needs to realize that if he or she doesn't pay that amount of money, then the experience will suffer, and exposure to future technologies will get delayed in India, which impacts individuals, it impacts businesses, and it impacts the country per se on competitiveness. But on the other side, the government also needs to realize that a spectrum hungry industry like telecommunications cannot have reserve prices which are absolutely out of whack, right? They can't be 4 times, 5 times, 6 times higher than rest of the world. It doesn't stack up, right? And the fact that if we have to tax these industries, they need to be taxed in a fashion where where the industry doesn't end up paying 30% of their top line to the government in some format or the other. So I think the equation doesn't balance. The equation needs to balance. If this industry has to become predictable, if it has to become sustainable, and the customer has to get the best experience, which is comparable to the best in the world.
Okay, so two follow-ups on this, and then we'll of course move on to the larger picture as well. But Sanjay, the problems to both of these, and we did a small story about couple of weeks back about why there might be issues to this price hikes, right, in the near term. I mean, uh, the recent price hikes that happened in December went through smoothly because everybody hiked prices. But in a battered economy, when there have been job losses and salary cuts, can one expect a 30% ARPU hike or a 20-25% ARPU hike? I understand we need to go to a long-term number, but in the short term, since Bharti Airtel said in a con call that ARPUs will move up from 154 to maybe 200, which is, I'm presuming, about a 30% hike, can that happen? And two, on the government side as well, Sanjay, in an environment when this government we all know has a strapped balance sheet, can they let any form of revenues go if they are very lucrative?
Yeah, I mean, this is a dilemma, and we need to solve this dilemma. Yes, you're right that we have all been used to ARPUs of the voice and SMS era, when the
Yeah.
ARPUs were less and we could probably get away. But you forget that even at that time, when you stacked up the ARPUs of a medium end and high end customers, they were much higher than the ARPU
Yes.
that are there in the market today. And that
Yeah.
time we had a quasi oligopoly in the marketplace. It's the perfect competition that was created, and then a hyper competition that got created fallaciously in our market, which actually destroyed the pricing power of the market. And the prices came plummeting down. There were 10, 12 players in the market, fighting tooth and nail for the customers. Multiplicity of SIMs went up. Each guy was carrying 4 SIMs, 5 SIMs in his pocket, trying to create an arbitrage for himself and make a Mickey out of what was being offered. Now the fact is that this is not sustainable. And now when you see what data does for you, it's not only something that allows you to bridge your day-to-day connectivity issues. It goes beyond that. It gives you entertainment. It gives you work from anywhere. It gives you to educate yourself. You could do that, and there are many other formats, including health, including financial services, including many other forms of digital services that are possible. And today, if there's an ecosystem that's got created, if the access wasn't there, that ecosystem will go dry completely. So I think, given what telecommunications and what data can do for you today, I think the customer should understand that he should be willing to pay more. And I think he will pay more, because at the end of the day, the Maslow's hierarchy has changed. We ourselves say it's roti, kapda, makan, and Wi-Fi, which is nothing but connectivity. And if that is true, then why will you not pay what is required? And if people are not going to move out, if they're not going to occupy richer real estate, if they're not going to be spending money on other administrative things at work and at home, then why will they not pay for this data? I think they will pay for this data, is my take. Let's come on to the government. Yes, you're right. The government has to also see this industry as being a competitive tool in their hands to be globally competitive. This is not a cash cow that can be milked in the short run. These are highways that you're building for future, where a lot of technology, globalization, global competitiveness will come to every industry, no matter whether you make steel or you make liquor or you make commodity. You will need this industry, you will need connectivity, you will need data, you will need analytics to be able to compete in the markets of tomorrow. And the world is flat from that extent, because you can extend your reach to any part of the world with these technologies, and we've seen that happen the world over. So I think the government has to realize that yes, there might be a short term dent, but the amount of businesses that will flourish, and the government in some form or the other will recoup this money. They will
Yeah.
not make this money directly from the telecom
Telco.
companies, but
Yeah.
I think from the entire ecosystem and other businesses that will flourish at the back of this, government will make some form of revenues or the other. So I think in the medium long term, government will not lose. In fact, they will win out of this industry.
Well, it's an interesting point too. The consumers will probably consider whether the extra spending on data will be nothing compared to the savings that you do on commercial real estate and traveling and oil spends as well, because your petrol costs or the diesel costs will completely go down. But sorry, Sanjay, you want to finish that point? Then I'll move on.
Now, you please carry on.
Okay, great. So then let me try and move in from the newer happenings. This is all that stuff that probably needs to be done and not in our hands. But trying to think as to how global investors might be thinking, trying to think about what could the impact of some of the moves be. One of the things, Sanjay, I mean, Airtel, for example, has already announced that work from home plan, even in at a speed of about 300 Mbps. Do you see these things happen? that segmented revenues will go up. There are people who will take in higher speed plans, higher data plans, and therefore that will contribute in a big way to the telco revenues over the course of the next 1 year. Is that possible? 1, 2, 3 years?
Yes, I think upping the consumer experience and upping the capacities and reaching indoors to serve your customers is going to be a non-option. According to me, the public pressure will actually push all these companies to reach a minimum level of service uh, to be competitive and to be able to conduct what they want to conduct. When you look at the regulators in the rest of the world, and especially the ones who have now actually moved from 4G to 5G, the pressure on the operators from the regulators to up the game on speeds, on pervasiveness of the networks, on coverage, and the indices have really become stricter by the day. And I think same thing will happen in India. We still have the hangover of the voice era, and therefore the way we measure the customer service is probably a little parochial. And I think we need to redefine all that to make sure that we have the right measures that the operators deliver so that businesses can conduct a business without physical infrastructure and dependence on physical infrastructure. And I think that will happen. That's a non-option available. Now, coming down to your point about the speeds, look, wireless will always have a limitation. Wireless is a shared resource. When I provide wireless in a locality, through a cell site, there are many people who share that. And if everybody is going to stream high definition video or 4K content, then the speeds will come down. Because we don't have unlimited bandwidth available, unlimited spectrum available, and especially at these prices. Therefore, whichever part of the world the wireless grew, the wired also grew. I think in India, there's a room to increase the wired because homes will have to be serviced through wired technologies or a mix of wireless and wired. And there are so many innovative ideas that are coming across the globe to provide home connectivity. I'm linked to two companies, one in India, which does basically it helps the cable operators to convert their coaxials into providing data homes, because we don't have FTTH everywhere. There's another
Hmm.
company in the US that I'm associated with, which is doing a wireless wire. And they are already onto these 300 megabit speeds, and they talk about a gig speed, through those combinations. So I think that innovation will have to come to India. We will have to up the game. Otherwise, we will not be able to conduct so many activities in a concentrated area. And don't forget that very soon we'll be inundated with Internet of Things, which means machines will require connectivity and bandwidth as well. The moment that happens, our capability to deal with a million machines in a concentrated geography is going to become a challenge. And we are already seeing operators are saying they need more 4G spectrum. Of course, they need spectrum. Electronics and adding electronics and site alone cannot solve the problem. We will need a combination of indoor spectrum. I think operators are struggling on the amount of indoor spectrum that they have, which is sub gig, and the capacity spectrum. Both will have to be added. More electronics will be added, but the consumer demand is going to just go up. My own take
Yeah.
is that they shouldn't be worried about the demand. The rest of the industries today are struggling to up the demand, but this is one industry which is delineated from that problem.
Okay. What about the other factors? I mean, one is, yeah, so not worried about the demand is one thing. The other factor is the co-partnerships that can happen with telcos for additional revenue streams. Because I think I was reading this report. I don't know if you got it. I mean, you would obviously know about it, but I was reading this report by Ambit Capital, which spoke about how now telcos have become gateway to a variety of industries, entertainment, etc., etc., and bypassing them is not an option anymore. Do you reckon the ancillary revenue streams could become really big over a period of the next few years? Do you see that across the world as well?
Yes. So let me explain that to you quickly.
Yeah.
Uh, the whole voice and messaging world was a linear world. Data is a non-linear world. And let me explain the non-linearity to you. When we offer data or data services, we talk about an ecosystem which caters to access, it caters to devices, it caters to storage, it caters to security, it caters to digital services, and it caters to digital content. All of
Mm.
them play together to provide you services, right? And the cardinal rule in the digital world is winner cannot take it all, right? So you have to learn to collaborate and ally with others to bring a level of service to your customers and experience to your customers. Only when all elements of the ecosystem work together does customer get a great experience, and he's happy paying you the prices that he's paying you. And for that, people have to ally. And I think for a long time there has been a tussle between my revenue, your revenue. So there are pluses to it, minuses to it. When the ecosystem comes together, the customer, pays you more because he gets more value, he gets content out of this, etc. The downside is that over time, operators have bundled everything into a price. So if I give you a price of 500 rupees, everything is bundled. So even if I
Right.
put more content in it, the customer doesn't end up paying you more. If he ends up paying you more, you end up passing that to somebody else. So the formula can only work when that 500 rupees actually becomes 1,000 rupees, right? And then I can share with everybody. But I think more collaboration, everybody seeing each other as, complementing and supplementing each other on a lot of things, for the customer experience and long-term sustainability is what will be the order of the day. I mean, yes, there will always be a tussle with the OTT guys to say, can I bypass? Can I not give my revenues to this guy? But by and large, I think there'll be all types of models. There'll be models where they will bypass the operators. There'll be models where operators will try and bypass and try and do something internally. But eventually, interoperability works and the walled garden doesn't work. So if people build walled gardens around their models and service, it will not work. It is not sustainable. It is not scalable. So I think eventually it'll be open environments. Everybody will work with everybody. And I think there'll be enough money if the service is right, if the experience is right.
Okay. And would you reckon, Sanjay, that one of the factors that could also aid margins or revenue streams for telcos would be lower customer acquisition costs? I mean, the telco has whatever 33%, let's say one third divided. For that customer to sell to that customer of various other services would be much easier, and therefore does that help?
Yes, I mean, if you can really have that sort of prowess that you have the capability that the company has built. Now you're creating a very complex model here. You're saying within a telco there will be a financial services capability. Within the telco there'll be health services capability. Within the telco there'll be entertainment capability. Within the telco, there'll be other capabilities that will come in. Now for a telco to have all these capabilities inside is not easy, right? And therefore, the partners will bring in that capability. And if the telcos can build, yes, some bit of revenues will go to them because of those capabilities. And we are seeing that. I mean, telcos have made their own platforms on entertainment, etc., and they're trying to compete. But eventually, the size of a Amazon Prime or the size of Netflix, is not easy to offset with something which is in house. Some countries like China, they are able to do because they are close to some of
Yeah.
these, and they don't allow them. But India hopefully will not get there. India is an open environment, and I think we will learn to work with everybody. My own take is that there's a lot of money to be made. We are at the tip of the iceberg. The consumer will spend more, quality
Got it.
services will be paid for.
Okay. So I've asked you a few questions. Let me ask you, what do you think? Let's start with Facebook and Geo, right? Or Facebook and Geo, or General Atlantic and Geo, etc., etc. What is it that they are seeing when they are investing money at virtually top dollar right now? I'm not saying this is the bottom, I mean, but from a valuation perspective, this is the highest that probably this was been valued at thus far, right? What is it that they are seeing, to your mind?
Yeah, first of all, you spoke about those 22 multiples. My own take is that I think looking at 1920 multiples may be a little fallacious. You'll
Okay.
be better off looking at the multiples for 21, 22. And if you look at a valuation on 21, 22, then Geo's valuation could be anywhere between 13 to 15x, back of the envelope calculations. And if you look at that, then the purpose behind those valuations for a strategic person to come in and a financial investor to come in could be very distinct. So Facebook, for example, has a large ecosystem in India. India is a WhatsApp country. people wake up to a WhatsApp, sort of a usage and sleep to that usage as well. And in their eyes, they would want a geo because somebody has 300 million plus customers. They have a service to protect, or a platform to protect against the Chinese, so they need a solid collaboration over here. We know TikTok is there, we know WeChat is there, and that's a great protection combat for that. We also know that they have been struggling with WhatsApp payment, approvals for some time. If they can get those approvals and then start off with a large platform, which is online commerce, which is talked about with Geo, then that's a great start. And the valuation that they will get. So what's the difference we are talking about? Airtel, with the same yardstick, will be valued at 8.5, 9. So they've paid a premium of say 5, 6 times, right? That's a very small premium to pay for Facebook. If you were to look at WhatsApp payment, if that was to get legitimized and be off the ground with millions of customers, I think that's a great payback, because if they were to go and list WhatsApp tomorrow, that valuation will be worth several $100 billion. And so this is a very small change for that. But the moment you look at the financial investors, I think for them, they all have a horizon. They want to make money, get a return, exit. And if somebody is saying that I'm going to go IPO in a overseas market which values such like platforms a lot more, I think it makes a lot of sense. Plus, clearly, I think the differential that they are paying for this, they are definitely buying the story and the logic that Geo is presenting to them on non-access revenues. Access revenues is the network and the Geo services that they provide, but the platform has much more than that. So obviously that value is being accorded to that platform. Of course, the revenues still have to come out of there. The monetization of that has to happen, but they're all believing in that story. And I think that's a great start, because if people start believing in that story, then the virtues of the telecom companies who have a 360-degree play could be very different in future. Their valuations could be more closer to other platform companies of the world than only a pure play telecom. So I think that's a good news. And if somebody can make it happen, and if it's somebody from India, I think that'd be a great story to talk about in future.
Yeah, I mean, the other bit is listing Geo overseas, right? And it's just come out of in the last 1 month after the FM announced those measures. And maybe that could be an interesting thing too, Sanjay. You would not have thought when you were heading the largest telco back then that such a thing would have been possible. But if you had the choice, would you do that? Because the valuation multiples out there are certainly much higher than what you get in, say, India right now.
Yes, those were the formative years, and 5G was not a reality, and 6G was not being spoken about. Given this, and the very fact that this is not a B2C world, this is a world of use cases, and if you can build use cases around technologies like 5G, and then solve problems of latency and have Internet of Things playing with you, I think the whole thought process changes. So I think that has changed with the business models and the opportunities that lie. With these opportunities, of course, maybe, I would have also thought like that, but those opportunities were still evolving. We were moving from 3G to 4G. I was there when 4G happened. We were the first guys to roll out 4G. But to have thought that 4G will, migrate to 5G that quickly, and world will start talking about 6G alongside, I think is something that's changing the entire dynamics of how this thought process is working.
Okay. Sanjay, I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm asking you. You told us about the logic that maybe a Facebook would have or a financial investor would have when it comes to geo platforms. There's a lot of talk about the Google Vodafone bit, or AT&T Bharti, or some other platform and Bharti. I mean, numerous names get floated around. What about the other two telcos? I mean, what would it be for a large global investor to come in and join hands, collaborate, stroke, invest in a Bharti Airtel or a Vodafone idea?
Look, that yardstick in my mind, and I'm not wearing a financial hat alone here, and I'm not a financial wizard by any standards, but I'm wearing a business hat and
Sure.
giving a business logic to what I will tell you. I think that yardstick doesn't vary whether it's a Geo or whether it's Airtel or whether it's a Vodafone. Ultimately, if I have to come and invest from a balance sheet perspective, I need to be convinced that I'm getting into a company which is not over leveraged and will not have the ability to raise capital in future, because this is a very capital intensive and capital hungry industry. We know every element of this industry requires a lot of capital, and that capital is not petty change. The second thing is that if I'm investing, I would look at a balance sheet where the balance sheet is asset light. Nobody likes very heavy assets on a balance sheet, and I think that is from a balance sheet perspective. But let's come down to the P&L. I mean, of course, when you invest in a company, you want that the company generates enough cash flows to invest in future technologies and customer experience. If it cannot invest, then the business is not sustainable. I think that's clearly one issue, and that can only come when there is pricing power with those operators, and there are ARPUs which can sustain the business over a longer period in time. I think that becomes quintessential. And finally, to say, is this company going to be a pure play access provider only, or it's a company that is generating new partnerships, relationships, and therefore new revenues and profit pools, which will probably be in cash tomorrow and has the ability to work with a larger digital ecosystem. And that is something which is, a newfound ask with how operators are finding it just tough to survive only on access revenues. Some markets you can, where probably it's only a duopoly or a near monopoly. There probably it's possible, but in a oligopolistic sort of a stuff, just a long term sustenance, and especially migrating to 5G and 6G with only access revenues might be a question mark. So I think I would look at all these things, and if I find an answer to say yes, why not? The problem that you're talking about is that at least one out of the three players is very heavily leveraged, has not
Mm.
invested enough in 4G, and therefore, a question mark to say, if we put our money, are we putting in good money, chasing bad money? And that becomes a question mark. And then the government, court cases are still not settled. AGR issues are still not settled. There's a deferred spectrum sharing that has to be paid to the government, and more money has to be invested for future and also becoming contemporary with existing networks. Now that's tough. Airtel, on the other side, has a balance sheet, which is more balanced. They still have a leverage capability, and we are seeing that. That's why you're seeing in the last few quarters, Airtel is narrowing its data delivery gap with Geo and is increasing its gap with VIL. So I think they are moving in the right direction, and they are also paring their debt out. And anybody would probably go and lend to them. They've raised capital recently as well. So clearly, two guys in the market seem to be there for the long run. We have to see the survival of the third one. Can you imagine in COVID, if VIL was dying at that stage or not there, what would happen to the customers? I mean, there are millions and millions of customers who are still on 2G and 3G, and Airtel and Geo have not sunset 2G and 3G as yet. Where would those guys go? There's no capacity with one guy to absorb all those customers. It would have been a chaos, right, in the country if that would have happened. So I think it's in the interest of the country to keep an oligopoly alive and make sure that the third is sustained. How is a question mark, because even in developed markets with higher ARPU, the third player struggles. He struggles to make money. So I think that dilemma is there. Hopefully, I hope that we'll have more than two players in the market always, for the better of the market and for the better of customer experience.
Well, well, let's wait and watch how that shapes up. But this can go on and on, Sanjay, I'm sure. But this was lovely to have your thoughts over this period, last half an hour, to try and understand some facets of how this ecosystem is developing. I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to talk about this, because a lot of things are happening as we speak. But thanks so much for taking the time out and speaking to us, Sanjay.
My pleasure.
Right. Well, that's Sanjay Kapoor needs no introduction, really, talking about his thoughts about the telecom space and the pulls and pressures around an investor or a sovereign wealth fund or a strategic investor when he wants to think about investing into any of these or collaborating with any of these three players when in India. Viewers, thanks for tuning into this broadcast.